coordinator. And last week, for those of you who may or may not have attended, we had Tina Wallace, who is the parent mentor of Columbus City Schools, present on what a parent mentor is. We do recognize that not every city has a parent mentor. I'm amazed that Tina is the only parent mentor for Columbus City Schools. So with that in mind, there's always more people that could help improve any program. So the topics we're going to be talking about is, what is a transition coordinator? What is a transitional SSA? What is a transition to adulthood? Transition section of an IEP, and agency partners and the parental role. So our presenters are Ms. Kayla Dean, who is one of the transition coordinators for Medina High School in Medina County. And we have Ms. Jen Call, who is a service and support administrator, otherwise known as SSA, with the Medina County Board of Developmental Disabilities. So I will start with Jen, and Jen, just say who you are and maybe how you got into this field. Go ahead and get started.
Sorry, I had muted myself while I was coughing. So I'm Jen Call. Like Deb said, I'm a service and support administrator with a specialized transition age youth caseload at the Medina County Board of Developmental Disabilities. And I stumbled my way into this field. I started off working at Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities back before it was called that. So it feels weird to say that's where I worked. But it was called the Rehabilitation Services Commission back when I was there, and worked very closely with the county board. And when my position became available, I took the opportunity and happily switched over to work at the county board, where half of my caseload was still my caseload, and have been working here for almost 13 years now. So that is me. Kayla, do you want to kind of chime in and talk about your background?
I would love to. Hi guys, I'm Kayla Dean. I'm a transition coordinator here at Medina City Schools. I am actually a tag team. My partner in crime is Emily Esquia, and she's a veteran in the field as well, with like 15 years in this position. I am newer to the position. This is my second year, but I am not so new to transition. Prior to this, I taught a small transition program through the ESC of Medina County. And then I've also, previous to that, I taught Project Search. We have one in Medina County. I taught that for 3 years. And I had like 1 solid year in the classroom. So transition is something I'm very passionate about. And Jen and I have actually worked since my time in Project Search. So there was already a really nice, really built relationship there. And yeah, I love it. It's great.
All right. Well, Deb, do you want us to just jump right into our presentation?
Yes, I do. Awesome. Yes, please.
So our first, you already kind of talked about what we are going to be presenting on. So we'll just jump right in. And but before we get started, just want to share that, transition planning, and we're going to talk a little bit about that because we would not be transition professionals without using a platform to talk about planning. But we want to make sure that everyone understands that transition planning is very individualized for every student. And so we may talk about general timelines and things like that today, but everything, for every child is going to be different. So we don't want anyone to think, if we talk about doing something at age 16 and you're already at age 18 with your child, that you've missed the boat. That is not the case at all. So just want to kind of give that little disclaimer that this is all in general. So, all right, yeah. Kayla.
Okay, so our first slide goes over what is a transition coordinator, and depending on what district you guys are currently in, this is going to look different, and this title is going to look different comparatively. So really what that individual that's put in the transition spot, whether that be an intervention specialist working on the transition, if it's for the smaller areas, special ed coordinators are sometimes in this position. They have a lot of different titles, but it's really just the support of your student or students that are on that journey from school to adulthood. And that can look in a multiple different ways. We coordinate with a bunch of different people, so we are completely immersed in the team. We work with the intervention specialists in Medina County very, very closely, where we are writing the Section 5 for all those individuals. We are meeting, assessing, and helping do placements. We kind of do a collective view of everything. And that could be the same in the district you're in. Depending if you have different organizations, they could help kind of facilitate that placement. They facilitate with all related services. They facilitate with DD, OOD, all the different outside agencies that they might be working at. So here's your nice long list that is going to look different depending on where you are, but we provide a continuum of services from school to adult life and really helping that transition ease for the families. We help the IEP team with the transition planning and kind of using that backwards planning that we'll talk about to get there. We serve as a link between school and career activities. So what kind of opportunities are given in the community that we could link some of our students with? We monitor students for work for credit experiences. So in Medina County, we have some opportunities where our students are able to work with Goodwill and earn not only a paycheck, but credits. And we have some other like CBI experiences that we work with. We help adding employment skills into the curriculum. We meet with our teachers and go over different curriculum to help start to implement transition into an earlier age, even into our middle schools in 8th grade. We provide information and training to secondary special education teachers, so we help them with the transition process. We help in the development of the IEP. Our section is always, writing Section 5, but Section 5 is really supposed to drive that IEP, where our goal for the student is to make them successful in their life. And so that information really helps to be a driving force for that IEP. We establish networks of support for families and students, develop relationships. We work with a multitude of agencies, businesses within the community to build placements and relationships. We advocate for changes in schools and district programming, which is always ongoing, and we coordinate both on and off campus employment opportunities. Yeah.
A lot.
It is a lot.
It makes the days go fast.
Yeah, I think
So
you're up.
on the flip side, I, as a transition service and support administrator, do a lot of the things Kayla just talked about, but from the County Board of Developmental Disabilities perspective. So we have a lot in common with our roles and our responsibilities. Not so much developing IEPs as an SSA, but supporting obviously families with IEPs. So as an SSA, our role is to support individuals that are eligible for county board services. We assess their needs and then help identify supports or services that would address whatever a young adult or child or young adult's needs are. With the transition age, we specialize in knowing about IEP law, IDEA rules, those types of things, to have a little bit better of understanding than a quote unquote typical SSA about school type topics. In Medina County, we do have specialized caseloads. There are 3 of us that are transition age service and support administrators. Not all counties do this. More and more are. So not everywhere will you find someone in this role. Our caseloads are ages 14 to 22. So every month, we take a look at the kids that turned 14 in the month prior, and we transfer them onto our transition age caseload. And then we will work with them until they exit school services. So whether that's 18 or 22, they'll be with us on our transition age caseloads until they exit. And actually, we keep them longer than that. It's typically the fall after they exit. But I have a couple of kids on my case. Kids, I call them all kids. Young adults on my caseload that exited a year or two ago, just for a variety of reasons. But I still am working with them happily. So, but this gives us a chance to help teams explore supports for the future based on a student's strengths, preferences, interests, and needs. And then our goal, along with Kayla's goal as a transition coordinator, is to work towards that smooth and successful transition from school to adulthood. We also, I talked about how we help with that transition planning. We also help families exploring things like Social Security, Medicaid, talking about supported decision-making and guardianship or alternatives to guardianship, registering to vote, all of those kind of age 18 adult type things. We help with crisis intervention, and we help with getting services and referrals in place for families to meet the needs of their children, whatever that may be. So what is the transition to adulthood? So we look kind of at definition, and transition is just that passage from adolescence into adult roles. And like I had said before, it's different for everyone, what that process will look like or what that transition will look like. Excuse me. So what we want to see is that young adult moving towards greater self-sufficiency and achieving goals. And we really look at transition as a time of exploration of their interests, what they would like to do in the future, looking at potential continued education, employment opportunities, career opportunities, and any kind of thing they want to do in the community. One second. Oh, I'm so sorry. I hope that's not going to go on all night. My apologies. So when we look at transition planning, Kayla, is this you or am I still going?
This is me. This is good.
Okay, go for it.
It's a good segue. So really when we're looking at the definition that we go off in education, we're looking at 3 different areas to really plan that post high school, all those goals we've got. And there's 3 different areas in which the IEP and the team and us as transition coordinators kind of focus on it. And that's your post-secondary education, which could correlate with that vocational training, integrated employment, and then your independent living. And like Jen said at the beginning of the slides, this looks different for all students. Depending on the student's needs, independent living might not be a focus that we need. Post-secondary education might not be the focus, so it really all becomes very independent. But this helps students become very active with themselves and gearing and teaching all those really important soft skills, those self-advocacy, and really speaking up about what their needs and wants are.
Hey, Kayla, I'm going to jump in. I just saw Deb posted a question from Facebook.
Yeah.
So before we forget about that. So the question was, so the children's, the SSA for Kids leaves and puts them with the transition coordinator, or do they work together? So to clarify, at least in Medina County, so I'm not sure how this happens everywhere, but the way we do it anyway is the children's caseload, we transfer from that children's caseload to the transition caseload from an SSA perspective. And then we work together as a transition SSA with the transition coordinator at the high school.
Yeah.
So hopefully
separate organizations. So
right.
Transition coordinators are usually hired through your any type of school entity. I'm hired through the ESC of Medina County, but I work within Medina City Schools. And Jen, as an SSA, is hired through Medina County Board of Developmental Disabilities.
Correct.
But it's very integrated. So we are always in communication. We call it like a multi-agency connection. So we're not only working with Jen, we're working with other organizations that are supporting our kiddo. So they're separate while they're in high school. And that's that 14 to 22, if that answers your question. Great. So this is the law, really, that says transition means a coordinated set of activities for a child with a disability that is designed to be result oriented. So we have an end result to really focus on that child's needs, and those are where you get that broken down of the training, the education, vocational training, employment, continuing adult ed services, adult services, and independent living. All these instruction related services, community experiences should all correlate with our end goal for our students. So that's all that is really saying. Backwards planning, which is your most important thing that you're doing without even knowing you're doing. So I always say that a lot of stuff in education has really fancy names for stuff you're already really doing. You're making a plan for your student, and as a team we all have these great plans. So you're figuring out what our end game is for our student, and that's going to look different depending on the student, obviously, but we set that end game, whether that's competitive employment in the community, whether that's college, whether that's whatever they'd like to do, a support adult program. And then we do our backwards planning. So we fill in the blank. Where are they now and how are we going to get them to that end goal? And that's a lot of what transition is. This is the most important thing you're going to hear all night. So as parents, as teachers, we have completely gotten used to being in charge and taking that advocacy role for our student and really being the driving force. So this whole transition into adulthood really needs to be focused on the student and start to really be student led, and where they are able to really focus on that self-advocacy. Everything that we're planning is around the student. Now we know how important moms and dads and teachers' roles are. And so that support system, we're not saying needs to disappear, but we really need to start taking what are the wants, those pins or spins or whatever you want to call them. What are our strengths? What are our preferences? What are our interests? And what are the needs of the student to really get them to where they're supposed to be? So it's really important for them to understand why we're doing all of this and be a part of their own journey. They're so used to being told what to do. So it's really important for them to kind of take a leadership role. Being able to make these choices for themselves is so huge, and taking ownership of themselves. Like we've said a couple times, for us, we start this process at age 14. This could be, usually this is just an account of starting what is transition, what does this look like, and what are we going to be planning. But it's really important to start that when in those early years to get them prepared for this type of vocabulary and language that we'll be discussing. These are all what are driving that transition piece and that advocacy journey for that student. So self-determination kind of says it all. And it's defined as having abilities and opportunity to steer one's life in a direction that contributes to personally satisfying life. This is all our goal for any of our students. And below are listed a bunch of different ways to make that happen. So it's all about teaching our students how to identify what might be hindering them, or what's a barrier in their life, and what are some choices to kind of get around that barrier, and what are we going to do, and which one do you want to do? Not that, your parent or your team says you have to do, but which one sounds the best? And then setting your goals. Goals are so important to have moving forward in life, and it's something that really brings a lot of confidence to you when you're able to set and complete goals and identify the problems. Monitoring yourself. So am I getting close to my goal, or have I already reached my goal? Being aware of really what makes up you, that self-awareness is what we're really trying to push into our students. You are an important part of society. So what are those great strengths you have to bring to the table? And how do you prefer to do that? Do you like to be by yourself? Do you like to be with groups? Do you like to work at night because you don't like to be up in the morning? Do you have crazy interests that like you just want to tell the team, I like to do this and I think I'm really good at it? And really knowing how to ask for help and need help to really reach those needs to get to our goal is really important. So that self-advocacy of all that self-awareness, and then that self-efficacy is just knowing that you can. They've been told, here's what you're going to do and here's how we're going to do it, or don't worry, I'll do it for you, or whatever the situation is. And that's just great to know that they've got such supportive people on their side. But also, it's time to kind of take a break on that and let them really earn that self efficacy and knowing that they can and they will. This little document this is part of what the IEP looks like. So this is that first page in the transition section 5 post-secondary transition section. And this is what really the other sections look like as well, but this is just the focus on the post-secondary training and education. So when you see an IEP, this is what it's going to look like. And everything between the 3 different sections are going to be correlated. You're going to figure out that backwards planning. So if our end goal is for Johnny to hold a competitive job in the community, and we know that's our end job, that college isn't our thing, maybe our goal is going to say after high school graduation, Johnny will continue his training to become competitively employed in his community in the career field of his choice, potentially sales. So that could look in a multitude of different ways, or maybe it's specific and that student's like, I want to work at Target. I love Target. How am I going to get there? And so that would be your goal in this section. And everything below are those, I call them spins because I like to put the strengths first when it comes to students. So your strengths, your preferences, your needs, and how you're going to achieve that. Course of study is what level of education are they currently receiving? Are they in touch with the general ed curriculum? Are they in a more adapted setting? It's just a really good clear-cut thing so the team knows to support the student and what the student may need. And then the activity is always to support the goal and really where that gap might be. So here are all the strengths, preferences, needs. Here's our goal. What could I do to scaffold this? So we're not gonna, if it's a new young student and the goal at the end is to get a job at Target, we're not gonna automatically say, help Johnny get a job at Target. We're gonna start to build upon this. We're gonna maybe get him familiarized with Target. We might have him talk to a Target employee. You know, it's going to look different for all kids, but it's really just to start to dip the toe, I always say, in the employment world, and build upon it as they grow each year. And then that continues. The same with the independent living. If there's an independent living goal, this can look, it's just to support, you know, is this something that the student would benefit from to help increase their independence in the community? So are they somebody that might need to work on some hygiene activities and might need some support in that? Is that something that budgeting would fit really nicely into this to correlate with some of the goals in the IEP? Any way the team sees fit, if they think it's a good fit for the student, all that info would go in here. And that's the same with the goal. So what's our end goal for Johnny? I always use Johnny. I don't know why. What's our end goal? Is our end goal Johnny will live in a supported apartment? Maybe. Okay, great. Well, let's see, how can we get him there? Because it's still independent. So maybe he needs a little bit of more cooking or safety in the kitchen. We can help add activities to get him there for that.
We kind of talked
Okay.
about most of this. I think the
Yeah.
biggest thing, that Kayla, I think we've run into with families before is, we talk about a transition plan and we've had families say, well, my child doesn't have a transition plan, but realizing that the transition plan is part of the IEP. It's not a separate document. It's
Right.
all within the same thing.
And it's quite the fluid document, and that's the point of it, is that it's supposed to be continuously fluid and shared with the team so that ideas can be bounced off one another to help support. But if changes occur, that's awesome. That goes all into knowing what you want, wants, needs, and all that stuff that students sometimes get so stuck in a rut that they've said one thing and they're not allowed to change it. But so making changes is really what makes the plan effective.
Yeah, and Deb, I saw you comment about using charting in the life course. Those tools are perfect to help plan this transition section. You know, if a student doesn't know what they want, or but they know, like on the life trajectory, like I definitely know I don't want this, like that's just as important as including, you know, information on what they would want. So that life trajectory especially is so helpful for this transition.
It's a really
section.
easy document to access as well that really makes sense for everybody moving
Yep,
forward so that you can plan that backwards planning and see what that next step is.
yep. I think we talked a lot about all of this
Yep.
stuff
So
about what
this is
goes
just,
in.
yep.
Yeah. Do you want me to
This
buzz
is,
through that?
yeah, I think, again, when 14 starts, you know, we're so used to IEPs when they're little, the student might not be there. It's really important to start inviting all your students to those. We want the goals to align with the activities. So, what our goals overall for our students should be driven by the students' wants, needs, and they should all correlate together. Goals are not something that have to be completed, but are really, really important to really see what is helping or hurting or needs to be implemented for that student. And progress should completely be shared. We share quarterly progress with our parents, just like they would get an IEP progress report for their regular typical goals. We share that same with our activities to see how that's going, so everyone's on the same page. Again, this is all about what they'll receive after high school. So most occur after high school. A lot happens. It could happen within, but what they will do, not what they hope to do. This is all. Where are we focused on to drive realistic goals for our students? So as we would love for them to want to always reach their dreams, we really want to teach them, and that's part of that backwards planning, what are realistic and achievable goals. So, yes, I might want to be on the basketball team in the NBA, but really talking to them about what's a realistic and really talking about what their strengths are. I think this goes into a lot of that self efficacy and advocacy for oneself and knowing yourself, that they don't just have these little strengths that somebody else might have. They have their own personal strengths and preferences and interests. So really trying to figure that out. And when you might get those unrealistic goals, that's really great data to say, okay, well, we need to have some maybe realistic conversations to help support the student. We never want any false info. There's your 3 areas. Students' responsibilities for post-secondary goals, and this was that not held accountable. So the district is not held accountable if the goals are not attained. These are just a driving force that we'd like the students to start to think about. If the student doesn't end up, you know, being at a 4-year college, or whatever the goal might have been, it's okay. Nothing is set in stone. That's why it's such a fluid document, but it's really just getting information to the student and being able to set them up with something a little in their back pocket that they can leave with. The ultimate goal is for each person to be a meaningful and engaged member of the community with work, life, and social connections. That is your biggest goal for your student, is an active role in the community. They're not just somebody that you're worried about, but we've given them some skills that they could go out and put a little stamp on where they live and what they do and be proud of that.
All right. So we put together in Medina County several years ago a transition planning timeline for students to help families just kind of wrap their head around, because this, you know, that whole transition is so ambiguous and it's overwhelming. And so we put this together as a guide to just help families have a general idea of what to expect during the transition planning process. And but also, like I had said at the beginning, but to remember that this is just a general kind of tool and it's not the be all end all plan. um, and yes, Deb, I can send you the PDF of this timeline. It is kind of Medina specific because the backside of it lists like our local, like JFS contact number and that kind of stuff, but it can be easily adapted for other places too. So we're going to zoom in on these areas here because it's kind of hard to read. So looking at that age of 14, when we start the transition planning or the IEP in which the student will be turning 14, we really start to focus on really from a school perspective of just starting to gather data, on what a student's post-secondary transition goals might be, looking at, where we can start building work skills, all of that kind of thing, and starting to include the basics of that into the IEP. At age 15, typically when a student is coming into 9th grade, they'll meet with a transition coordinator for the first time. And then beginning again to start talking about what they're interested in the future. And, are they interested in going on to college or some other kind of academic training, or are they looking to go into employment? And start looking at experiences that they can have in school that will help support that down the road. When we get to age 16, that is when the county board has to redetermine eligibility. And then also looking at from an educational standpoint, we'll start talking at that point about graduation timelines and if the student wants to exit or plans to exit at the end of 12th grade, or if that potentially might be extended longer. In 10th grade, they look at the Career Center. Students might be referred to the Career Center for a vocational assessment to determine, what type of program that they could be successful in completing. At our Career Center in Medina County, we do have some specialized programs for students that might not be able to handle the full rigor of a traditional Career Center program. So we might even start to explore that at this age. And then again, we'll start to gather as a school team, they'll gather data on the spins of that student as it relates to employment to start to build that transition assessment section in the IEP. And then at this point, and really at any point, beginning at the age of 14, we start to think about when is the right time to refer a student to Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. And we'll talk about them as an agency partner in a little bit. For some students, we may, think about referring them at the age of 14 or 15. If they're really on a fast trajectory towards employment, or for some, it might not be until 16, 17, maybe even 18 or 19, depending on their path in school and what that will look like. So at the age of 17, again, we just kind of continue, what the student's been doing as far as developing work skills, consider referring to OOD if they haven't already. And then when we get into that age 18 to 22 range is when the IEP team really decides when the student is going to be exiting. In Medina County's districts allow social graduation for a student to continue on in education or special education to continue to develop those independent living and vocational skills development. If there's programming that would be of benefit for the student. So the ultimate goal isn't for every student to stay in school until the age of 22 just because they can. The goal is to find that sweet spot of when they have received, the training that they need to be successful in adult life and, exit at that time. And so for some, like I said, that might be after 12th grade at the age of 18. And for some, it might be a year or two after that. So then at the age of 18, if a student is staying, the focus really shifts from, I am struggling tonight, from an academic focus to more of a vocational and independent living focus as far as development of skill and education. And then the school district will continue to evaluate, transition assessments and looking at strengths and interests and abilities. and needs, as well as assessing those areas. From a vocational perspective, we'll look at internships, volunteer opportunities, summer work opportunities, whether that's, through OOD services, or if a student's able to maybe get a little summer job. They may start job training in a program like Kayla mentioned. In our area, we have Goodwill. They may look at a project search program, something like that. Or they may be ready for job development and to start looking for a permanent job. And then at 18, again, we also focus on those things we may need to explore for adulthood, like applying for benefits or considering guardianship or alternatives. And then that is when we really, as SSAs, start to really focus in on planning for what it's going to, what we're going to need to look at for adult supports. So we really start around a year to 2 years from exit from school services to really focus in on that planning and start to develop a young adult's individualized service plan, ISP, that we have in the DD world. So once a student graduates and accepts their diploma, they will fall somewhere hopefully within the employment and adult services realm. And we plan that based on the path to employment. So we'll get into that in a little bit. We have a whole slide about that. But again, the end goal of all of that is the ultimate goal of them being in the community. Whoops. These screens are so touchy with these PowerPoints. So one thing to keep in mind, and Kayla, I'm not sure if I was covering this or if you were, but I can. When we're talking about post-secondary education, whether that's college or that's some other kind of adult career center or those kinds of things, it's important to remember that under IDEA, a student is guaranteed a free and appropriate public education, and that includes accommodations as well as modifications to their curriculum if a student needs modifications. When we're looking at post-secondary education, those laws fall under Section 504 of the Americans with Disability Act, and it's very different from when we're looking at IDEA rules for K through 12 schooling. So the big thing to know is there will be no modifications or very, very minimal modifications at the post-secondary level. They will only provide accommodations. So IDEA guarantees that free and appropriate public education, whereas Section 504 guarantees access to education, equal access. So that's one big thing to keep in mind, because a student will not have an IEP in college and that kind of thing. So the Employment First initiative, Ohio has had in place for many years now. And the biggest tenets of the Employment First initiative are that everyone has abilities, skills, and talents to enrich the community and people around them, and that everyone can expect that community employment will be the preferred outcome for them upon graduation from high school. Now, that doesn't mean it's the only outcome, but it's the preferred. And so we focus on, with the IEP, building skills towards employment and not a sheltered workshop or something along those lines. So we want to hold high expectations that everyone will be able to have a job at some point in the future. And for some, that may be immediately upon graduation. And for some, it might not be, for a couple of years, and that's okay. But we always want to keep employment as a possibility, is the biggest takeaway from that. So we all know that the benefits of competitive integrated employment can include greater independence and wealth building potential, improving self-esteem and satisfaction with life, creating a diverse workforce, and just knowing that all citizens are able to meaningfully participate in society is the reasons behind that Employment First initiative. So I talked about the path to employment before, and really what that is we take a look at where someone is with wanting a job. So place one on the path to employment is I have a job and I might want a better job or a different job, or I might need help to maintain my job. Place two on the path to employment is I want a job, but I might need some help finding one. Three is I'm not sure about work and I might need some help to learn a little bit more about it. And then the fourth is I don't think I want to work, but I may not know enough. There's some people that are adamant that, nope, I don't want to work. I never want to have a job. Don't talk to me about it. And that's okay. But we'll subtly bring it up because, again, we don't want people to feel that they can't work and just want to shut it down just because of that they don't think it's possible. So when we're planning for adulthood, we really look at where someone is on that path to employment as far as how we then approach planning for that person. So for some of those post-secondary options, it might be that we're looking at competitive employment. It might be that they're looking to enroll in college, and how can we support that young adult for that? It might be some kind of a specialized college program. Kent State University has the Career and Community Studies program, which is designed for young adults with special needs. Others do too. I know the University of Cincinnati, Bowling Green, Ohio State all have programs similar. Kent State is just close to us, so that's why that one was mentioned. Someone might be interested in looking at an apprenticeship or some kind of technical or adult vocational school, or someone might need more supports, and so we might be looking at adult type day programming, and that could be vocational training, or we in the DD field call that vocational habilitation. It could be an adult day program, which is more of a social and recreational. It could be a combination of both. And I've even had students who have a community job, but they are like, I only work 2 days during the week and on the weekend, but I don't want to sit at home bored all day. I want to make new friends. I want to do fun things. And so we may even look at a day program as a way to supplement their schedule to make life more enriching for them. So the important thing, again, to remember is the pathway may change over time. And that's what our hope is that someone doesn't get stuck, in a rut somewhere and never think that they can change what their path is. So we look at, I mentioned partnering with agencies in the community, and the county board and Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities become very important team members to that IEP team in high school, because there are a vast amount of services and supports that both agencies can provide to a young adult, child or young adult who is in that transition phase. So Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities is a state agency that we partner with, and they provide services to those people who are found eligible, either students and adults. They provide services to adults as well. As long as someone wants to work, they will provide services to them. And the goal for OOD is competitive employment. They offer a wide range of services for students, beginning at the age of 14, and then, like I said, going into adulthood. And they work together with students and families and school districts and county boards and other community partners to promote successful transition, just like all of us do. So their website is there, and a list of their common services that they provide for transition age youth include finding and services to find and keep a job, career exploration, work-based learning, so they could set up assessments in the community where someone could go and try out a job. They provide post-secondary education type services. So they could potentially help with some other type of training beyond high school if that's needed for someone to attain the job that is best matched for them. They provide job shadowing, paid work experiences, job coaching, and the list goes on and on and on. But again, their goal is successful transition into competitive employment. The County Board of Developmental Disabilities, for those who may not be as familiar, I want to talk a little bit about what we do and our goals. Our mission is at the Medina County Board of DD, and many county boards would have a very similar mission, is to promote and empower individuals with developmental disabilities to live, learn, work, and socialize in the community. We support right now about 1,450 individuals in our county. We are a resource not only for those that we serve, but for the community in general. So we sometimes get phone calls from people that don't even have a loved one, but they have a question about someone that they know in the community, and they want to know, hey, my friend Sally at church has a disability, and I want to make sure she can get to church. Like, how can I help her? So we get calls like that all the time of how to support folks that have developmental disabilities in our community. We encourage individuals and families to sorry, this screen is cutting off my PowerPoint. I can't read it. Encourage individuals and their families to be successful in the community, and so we try and support them as best we can to make that a reality. And then we help from early intervention clear to the end of life. So we're a lifelong service for individuals. When we talk about planning for adult services, I mentioned we look at the person's path to employment. And so what they're interested and needing in their future is how we are going to approach exploring adult supports. I mentioned before that we typically do that in the last year to 2 years before a student will exit from school services. And we take their situation, their desired timeline into consideration when we're exploring. So I've had parents who have children who are, 3 to 4 years out from graduating or exiting from school services. And they say, you know what, I want to start looking at options. I want to start looking at all of the programs that could be a potential for my child once they leave school, because I'll feel too rushed if I wait until that last year or two. So we've started touring programs as early as 3 or 4 years before they exit. And then we have families who say, I don't want to even think about this until we're in that last year of school. I'm too overwhelmed with my day to day. And that's fine. And we will meet families where they're at. And when they're ready, we're ready to help them explore options. I might send a nudging little email every now and then that says, hey, are you sure you want to wait? But again, we're there as a support and to help a family wherever and whenever they're ready. So one thing that we always want to keep in mind when we are planning for adult services is we want to take a multidisciplinary approach to that planning. So we don't want to forget, just because a student has all these supports in school, they're still going to have supports in adulthood. So we want to take a look holistically at the person and find a plan and the supports needed. It might not all be provided by one provider like it is in school, but we want to find those connections of how best to support the person. So for example, if someone has, needed speech therapy services, the county board doesn't provide that for adults, but we want to help them explore, how they could use their insurance to seek out speech therapy services in adulthood. Same with physical therapy, occupational therapy, those kinds of things. If someone struggles and needs some behavior supports, we want to make sure that we can get the things in place to help them be successful from a behavioral perspective. If there are medical needs, we want to make sure that we're assessing and have nursing involved so that we can make sure that, I'm not a nurse. I have not the foggiest idea about, some of those medical things that we might need to think about when we're looking at a day program and such. So again, involving either the school nurse or consulting, like we have a nurse at our county board. We might want to consult with them to see, here's the person's medical concerns. What do we need to think about in adult programming? Looking at assistive technology and what kind of high tech or low tech things can we put in place to make life easier for the person in adulthood. And so I'm not going to read through all of these, but again, we just holistically want to look at the person and from an approach planning from all areas and not just focusing on just employment. We talked before about applying for SSI and all of those kinds of things. So these are all the things we want to help support families if they want to consider these things and need some help in doing that. All right, Kayla, I think you're up.
Hey, yes. So this was touched upon briefly during my earlier spiel about changing the parental role, and that's really just taking that step back. So you are the decision maker, you're a team member, source of information, source of support, advocate for your student, teacher of self advocacy, and you do all this to support your child and your student during this whole time when they're a kid. And moving forward into this next step, we just want to let go a little bit. We want to take that step back while providing that net in case something doesn't go as planned. We want to encourage that independence. We want to allow them to fail, but knowing that they have a support system at home that's going to help pick up the pieces. They want to be a great listener and advocate and of advice, I would say, on how to express themselves. And they still need to have strategies to help their student and be encouraging and be like that big cheerleader in the background and teaching them how to build these relationships and advocate for themselves and have that self-efficacy, but just being that person behind that student. So that's really all that's saying, is a change of leadership almost. You're kind of giving the reins over to your student and letting them fail, and that's good because we don't learn much if we don't fail to but also showing them that it's okay and that you're there to help. This is that parent involvement, that effective transition plans are youth driven and family guided. So again, you being there through the entire process, not taking such a step back that you stop helping or stop showing up and attending meetings, but just being able to be that underlying support system and help them with their future planning. So asking them those hard questions about their future and helping them really start to brainstorm what their goals are and what are different ways that they might be able to reach those goals. Make sure that you are that person sharing that information if the student's struggling to still have that self-advocacy. So being that safe space to share information, but also being the person to rely that information when push comes to shove, and always looking at how to help. And one way that we love how to help is really chores. It's that first job. It's that building of responsibilities. Everyone, we ask a lot of students and students of all levels, do you have chores? And it's kind of like, kinda. But chores build so many beneficial factors to prepare them for the real world. Responsibilities, it gives them a sense of purpose, self-determination, reaching a goal. All of that stuff helps with chores. So we love to push the chores.
And the students hate when we tell their parents in front of them.
They do.
Oh, don't tell them that.
This
So,
is a duty.
Yeah.
Is this you, Jen?
I think so, but
Okay.
yeah. So we talked, and Kayla talked about kind of that letting our kids fail. And that's so hard to let that happen. But we as parents, that's our responsibility. And we really have to walk that fine line between the duty of care versus that dignity of risk. But that is where, in those failures, that our kiddos are going to learn to change and learn to do things differently and stuff like that. So we kind of walk that fine line a lot as parents in, not being too overprotective, on the far end, but not being neglectful either. And so we recognize that. and realize, we have to make those hard choices sometimes of, do I let them fall flat on their face, but be there to pick them up. But that's tough. So let's see. So the biggest thing to kind of, and I found this a couple of years ago, that it's just such a fantastic metaphor for parenthood in general. But to be a lighthouse, we need to think of ourselves in that way. And, lighthouses are solid symbols. They're there to help you, to guide you, to give you a bearing, when you're out at sea. And so we need to think of that in our role as a parent. So we need to help guide our students, be visible for them, give them, some support, but really, we need to let them, put them out there and let them go. We're not going to let them crash into the break wall, certainly. But yet we're going to let things get a little choppy sometimes, and the waves are going to get rough. And so that's kind of our role, and it's hard, but I thought that was a great metaphor. Does anyone have questions? I feel like we flew through that information, and it's a lot. But we'd love to answer questions that anyone has.
I have so many questions, but so as I said at the beginning, right now I'm acting as department head of the special education department over all 4 grades of the high school, and trying to work on building our transition program because we really don't have one at this point.
Mhm.
We are, I'm with Horizon Science Academy in Columbus, and we are a STEM certified CTE. Our programs are in a career technical format.
Mhm.
And so the kids choose their pathways, exposing them to everything in 9th grade, and then going forward, their curriculum's kind of put on one of the CTE pathways. My question is, not all of our kids on IEPs are going to want to go into a career that's on one of those pathways. It's a good guide through high school, but beyond that, it may not pan out. What's a good way to, one, contact potential employers, work-based, learning program connections outside of the school that we can partner with for our kids? And I can't think of the second part right now, but go with that part.
Well, I would say, use the people closest to you as your source of, your resources. So I would poll, your staff, your friends, your family, anyone, to find out who has connections that you could use for business contacts. The other thing, reach out. I know up here we have, so I don't know if any, they have this in Columbus. We have a multi-agency transition team. And we've always struggled with finding businesses to participate in that, just because their work schedules are so different than our work schedules and the demands. But I would, if you have a multi-agency planning team that you could also tap into to see if anyone there has business resources. Or sometimes there are employment collaboratives. I know we have an employment collaborative in Medina County. Cuyahoga County has a big one too. So there may be one in the Columbus area, and it's a network of a lot of folks that work within OOD and employment job developers through OOD. And they might be a nice source of a resource for you to contact businesses that might help with what you're looking for.
Yeah, I have to add on to that too. And sometimes it's easiest, that sounds so daunting, the community-based education. So we have a few different things that we kind of started in-house as well, starting small. So, there's certain areas that you could focus on, and whoever your clientele is right now, whoever your students are, is really going to drive what kind of jobs you're looking for. But some things that we've started, and again, you know, it all depends on your district and how accommodating they are. We were able to start like a buzz cafe inside, so that's what we call it. And the students make, they don't necessarily make it all, it's kind of split, but they make the food and they sell it, and they sell like puppy chow, hot coffee, iced coffee, to students really. And during the study hall, students, it's Tuesdays and Thursdays, they're allowed to come and access that, and they actually they charge, so they're able to buy their product and then redistribute their product, and it goes into a account that the school has set up to that they could do a field trip for the day, or you know, go get lunch together or whatever, depending on who you guys are servicing through that. But and I'm only using that as an example, is to start small. So sometimes right in within your building is something that's going to kind of lead to something else. So sending out who needs their recycling picked up and starting a shredding club for them. What teachers need their desks sanitized. So having an hour set apart during the day to go and do chores within the building, or who has filing that needs to be done. So starting small, but yes, there's business advisory boards too in certain areas that are always looking for some type of labor, you know, and everybody loves free labor. So reaching out just to see if there's any type of jobs. And again, start small, you know, going out, if you have access to leaving in the community, doing an hour. We have a couple sites, and we're blessed at Medina to have what's called the Bowman Independent Learning Center. And so our students are post-graduation, they've socially graduated, but they still needed to work on a bunch of independent living skills and employment skills. And so they're on an offsite house that's like right next to our high school. But they go out and clean one of our speech services that we use building. So whoever we contract with our speech service, so they clean their building, and then they were at a bowling alley type place. So they work within the community. They do our boosters, so they fill all the vending machines at our school. They did mail at our school, mail carts, kindness carts, all that kind of stuff. So lots of resources sometimes right in front of you, but it's just the funding, I know, is kind of tough in getting started.
I want to add to that, and then I know Tina has a question. I want to say on the same thing that she's talking about. Using the Charting the Life course tool allows that conversation with the parents and the student. Because if you have a student and they're interested in cars, well, that's where you're going to go,
Sure.
you know, to that place. So I would recommend really, and I know you know how to use those tools, and have that conversation with the parent and the student. Otherwise, you're going to be trying to shoot for everything and be overwhelmed. That's just my suggestion. I know we didn't have that slide. If I could just slip it in real quick. If I don't mess up this time. Slide on this one, and I want slideshow. Well, I'm just gonna leave it like this. So the simple tool here, and it's used with the Ohio ISP. We're really suggesting families use these Charting Life course tools, but it's a very simple plan, and the forms are fillable, and it belongs to the student or the family. So, you know, tonight we were just talking about, well, what do you want? Well, most of us would like to have a job or a volunteer opportunity that we endure, but the hard work is the planning. And, you know, we get concerned that some parents, they're overwhelmed when their kids are young, but that's the perfect time to help them, you know, learn a skill to do at home, so that they're learning as they grow and not waiting till they turn 14 and then, well, leave it up to the school to figure it out. So, you know, it's the Charting Life course really does help families be part of the solution and work as a team. So I just wanted to put this slide in there. Tina, did you have a question?
I was just going to tell Kristen that I don't know if it's just Columbus City Schools, because my daughter went there and I do know they still use it, but Job and Family Services, that you can get a hold of them, and they do like offer summer things, functional training services, that's right on Oakland Park right there. They, they work with the students through the summertime and let them like get a check, but also teach them skills. And I think you do that through Franklin County Board of DD or even BDR. So both of those are right, one is right there on Oakland Park. And then I know other ones like if you go through like call around and say like food for thought or places like that, they will tell you different places that that will help out and let the kids even just get volunteer hours just enough to get their volunteer hours in, and then sometimes they'll hire them. So I was just thinking, more where we're around.
Yeah. Yeah, and opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities is also another one, depending on your group. They do a lot of, even if the students aren't registered with OOD, they have pre-ETs that you could sign students up for. So pre-ETs is really that like pre-employment education, and where they learn, there's a whole curriculum depending on where you're at that they will offer starting from the beginning of just like learning what employment is to the end of getting a job. So.
I want
Great.
to add one more thing. We have an employment specialist with the Center for Disability
We
Empowerment.
do.
And so we're a non-residential independent living center, and we are federally mandated to offer 5 core services. So we do information referral, and we actually have a wonderful employment specialist on our team. And we basically use the wording of Charting the Life course to find out what that person is interested in doing and just go there. So I think Ann is on this call. So hello, Ann.
Kristen, also make sure that you come. And I couldn't remember if you were, I know you were here last time, but did
I
you
was-
hear we were having that transition fair? So make sure you try to come
Yes.
to that. That's December 9th
Yes.
for middle and high, but I mean, it could be anybody. We're doing it mostly for special ed, but I mean, we're welcome to ask anybody that wants to come for the middle and the high school, just so, it's for Columbus City, but like we've mentioned it to other people, just so, they know what's available to them. I mean, one kid is one kid. I don't care where they're from if they need help.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that's great about I love career pathway STEM stuff. And I don't know what the flexibility is that you guys have within that, those mandates or anything, but one thing that our career center does up here is they've implemented, and it gets, by the people in charge of CTE, they might not be too happy about it sometimes, but what they offered was a career training option, which really looks for those individuals where the curriculum is just maybe a little too high functioning for them. They're still able to so they mildly adapt the program. So maybe that specific student is able to learn the skill, but they're not able to complete the core curriculum of the program. They still let them attend it, but they will not receive the specific certificates at the end of it. So they're still participating fully within learning, but it's mildly modified. So maybe, any computer work is done with an intervention specialist or somebody. You're muted.
Our kids are primarily mild to moderate disability.
Okay.
So they're not moderate to severe necessarily, but we have some that are right on that borderline.
Yeah, for sure.
But I do think, we do have the ones who can go on into a computer engineering kind of degree, but they just needed that extra assistance through academics. But then you
Right.
have the ones that might not live independently because of their disability, but they're able to do certain jobs. So there's kind of that range.
Yeah.
And I just want to be able to offer all the opportunities across that range that the
Yeah.
kids are going to be able to do.
Well, and you're really looking to say, help them all, which is really great, but give yourself grace and think really small, I think.
For
Like,
sure.
maybe not so big, modifying or pull outs or all these different organizations love to come in and talk, and you're doing transition by doing that. You're
Right.
supporting them all those different ways. So
And we have a program within our program, so to speak, that's for these kids to work toward the 12-point credential through the graduation requirements for Ohio. And within that, she's working with some of our other CTE teachers to bring in people to present different employment opportunities in
Huge.
different
Yeah.
fields. And then
Yeah.
we're looking to have even our own job fair at the end of the year
That's
to
awesome.
have all these different places and different job, trades and public service and military and all that
Yeah.
to come in.
Yeah, just treating a program. We also have a couple other programs at our career center. One is like a career exploration. So they participate. They've gotten linked with. We had Bueller's. So we have a grocery store up here called Bueller's. They go and do that during their first year. But a lot of that program is going around the career center and
Yes.
shadowing the programs and seeing like which ones of these and just really figuring out what their niche is, but still gaining employment skills in a different type of setting. So,
Right.
cool.
Thank you.